Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our monthly free public education forum brought to you by Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And I am delighted that we have with us Ken Gartner tonight, and we will go through our respective backgrounds in just a moment. Um, but let me go ahead and pull up our slide presentation and walk you through what it is that we'll cover this evening. Um, Okay, let me, oops, one moment. Okay, so this should come up for you momentarily. All right, Ken, can you give me a nod if you can see my screen?
I can say affirmative and put myself on mute.
Excellent, thank you so much. So these slides will be available to everybody who registered. We'll cover quite a bit of information tonight, so feel free to come back and revisit the slides. We'll also send you the video recording. So, my name is Cece Doucette. I'm the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and that MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned an undergrad degree in communication. And never imagined this is where I'd be using my skill set, but I'm grateful that I can do this to help others understand the risks with today's technology and what we can do to have safer options. So I helped my public schools here in Ashland, Massachusetts become the first in the nation to even post best practices for mobile devices back in 2014. So it's been over a decade that I've been involved in this. And I helped to introduce legislation under my name. And then I've also helped to chaperone a number of other bills here in Massachusetts and helped to pass the first law in the country to do an independent investigation with New Hampshire. And we'll walk you through a bit of that. I co-founded a nonprofit called Safer Screen Time with my partner, Dr. Mikko Ahonen, who's one of the leading scientists out of Finland, where we can literally train the public on this issue in about an hour online. So pretty much on your lunch hour, everybody could train on this and get level set with the facts. And then I eventually co-founded Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and we are a coalition of citizens from across Massachusetts. And actually, many members come to us from other states and even from Europe and Canada to come along with us and talk about this issue and learn together. I also was honored to be brought down to the National Institutes of Health to co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And we brought with us experts from Canada. Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada, flew in to present with us. We had Dr. Martin Pall, Pall, who is one of the leading scientists on this to teach us what the biological mechanisms of harm are that are happening in our bodies. We had Peter Sullivan, who has long worked in the autism community. He also helped to get mercury out of the smokestack. So he's done a lot environmentally, but he used to be a fighter pilot with our government. And so he was up in these planes that have radar mounted all over them, up where the natural electromagnetic fields are super high. And Peter wound up getting very sick. When he left the military, though, he went to work for Silicon Valley as an engineer. And it was his friends who invented cell phones and other leading technologies of the day. And then Peter's health started crashing, and he didn't know why. And eventually he came to learn the science that we're going to share with you today that shows that these exposures to man-made radio frequency radiation are very biologically harmful. His two sons also wound up getting sick from this. They both wound up on the autism spectrum when they were approaching the preschool years. And that was many years ago. They have now left the autism spectrum. They are fully contributing members of society, but they both went to college. And they're no longer on the spectrum. And I went, wow, I didn't even know that was an option. But apparently, there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline and it didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in the environment. So the thought here is that if we can learn what the risks are and how to mitigate, you clean up the environment, go to eating as cleanly as you can with an organic diet so you're not putting any more chemicals into your body. Maybe do the heavy metal detox very carefully with a professional. And then ultimately, folks who are well acquainted with this will tell you to do the digital detox as a first line of defense. And of course, we never want to overpromise because each one of our bodies is very different and we respond differently to these environmental stressors. But by peeling back the onion on some of these invisible toxins, we can, in many cases, see vast improvement, if not complete remediation of sickness symptoms. So I was honored to have these folks with us. Also, the Environmental Health Trust was with us to talk about this at the National Institutes of Health. And I like to share this link because our talks were held to less than 10 minutes. And so if you want a highly credible, quick hit, this is a wonderful link to share with people. And then the EMF Medical Conference or the Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference. Back in 2012, 2014, when I fell down the rabbit hole on this issue, we could see that a lot of people were developing electromagnetic radiation syndrome, but we had no way to help their doctors learn about this or to give a proper diagnosis or to actually teach people what they need to do to be safe with today's technology. So we're very grateful that we now have the EMF Medical Conference, and EMF stands for electromagnetic fields of man-made radio frequency radiation in this case. There are also other types of EMFs with dirty electricity, and magnetic fields. So our talk today is going to focus on the radio frequency side of this. But we're so grateful that there were 24.5 continuing medical education credits available for 2 years, and folks could take this conference online and get fully accredited for this. Now that the accreditation period has passed, the executive director of the conference, Elizabeth Kelly, has taken the entire medical conference, all 4 days of lectures and panel discussions, and put them online at no cost. So you, your healthcare teams, your school healthcare teams, and anybody else who just wants to go learn from world-leading doctors, scientists, attorneys, and advocates, they can go to this link and see the more than 50 lectures and videos that are available on Vimeo or YouTube, and just slot them into your calendar. Maybe you can afford to watch a half an hour here or 20 minutes there or an hour here. But all of this incredible professional training is now available at no cost. And we're so very grateful because when most of us fell down the rabbit hole on this issue, we did not have these types of resources available. So we're very honored to bring all of that to you. So this is how I got involved. And our wonderful colleague here, Ken Gartner, is a certified building biologist with the Building Biology Institute, and that EMRS, after his name, designates that certification. Ken, I'll go ahead and introduce you if that's okay with you. So Ken went to school at MIT. He's a, certified electrical engineer in semi-retirement. He thought he was going to live out his retirement with his sweetheart, Sonia. They built their dream house and a smart meter was installed. And very shortly after that, she developed EMR or electromagnetic radiation syndrome. And so Ken they began to investigate. And it's not like you wake up and go, oh, gee, that smart meter went on. I got sick. You usually get really sick and you start investigating everything you can find to figure out what has made you so sick. You go to your doctors, you pay out of pocket, you go to specialists, You often spend tens of thousands of dollars just trying to figure out why you are crashing. Well, Ken and Sonia figured out that the tipping point for them was when Sonia got exposed to that smart meter. So Ken went and became certified as a building biologist so that he could know enough to help protect them in their home and take all these mitigation steps, but also, as time permits, go out and help others who are facing this same crisis in their health. So Ken is a wonderful resource. There are far too many certified or far too few certified building biologists in our world. So if anybody's looking for a career transition, we definitely need more of those. But he has founded Safer Housing Consulting, so folks are able to engage his services for that. I will be delivering parts of the presentation tonight, and then we'll turn it over to Ken, and you can hear him give his wonderful presentation as well. But here's how you can reach out to him directly. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is wireless radiation and health. We're going to look at the legal fine print that's been in our devices all along, and we're going to give a demonstration of what this invisible radiation looks like. We're going to talk a little bit more about natural frequencies versus radio frequencies, and then we're going to do the deeper dive into the science on long-term effects and then short-term effects from exposure to these man-made frequencies. And then my big head scratcher was, well, if this is as serious as the science is indicating, why don't we know? And then we'll look at, well, where are all these exposures coming from at both the personal level and the community level? And then most importantly, what can we do? What can we do as individuals in our own spaces that we have control over? And then what are professional solutions that exist already today? And then Ken is really going to help us to do the deep dive on smart meters. And once again, what are the solutions with smart meters? And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. We will need to wrap up by 7:55 Eastern time tonight to get ready for an 8 o'clock prayer circle that is happening in support of a court case that's going to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court on Wednesday with the folks out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, led by Courtney Gilardi and her neighbors. So we'll just need to end about 5 minutes sooner than we had planned to, so we can help with that prayer circle too. Okay, so for anybody who's with us right now that has an iPhone, we invite you to take that out right now and go into your settings. And what we're going to look at is the legal fine print that is in most of our devices that's been there all along, that many of us have never even thought to read, but it's how the industry has covered its backside. So our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have a page called See the Fine Print. And for example, the disclaimer that used to be in the Apple iPads literally said, watch out for seizures, blackouts, and eye strain because these man-made pulsations of radio frequency microwaves can cause these health effects. And sadly, I know of families in towns neighboring me where the children had their first seizures while using one of these tablets. So feel free to look at See the Fine Print, but we're going to show you right now in an iPhone. So from settings, go down just a little ways and hit General. From General, go all the way down to the bottom, and near the end, you'll see Legal and Regulatory. Tap that, and on the next screen, about 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure. What that radio frequency radiation exposure disclaimer is telling us is that this man-made energy, as they politely call it, was only tested for heat, and it was tested at a distance from the body. So if you use it the way that we're encouraged to use it by holding it in our hands or holding it up against the head or tucking it in our bra or our shirt pocket or our waistband or our back pocket, we are exceeding the federal communications limit for public radiation exposure. What they don't tell you is that one device has a whole bunch of different antennas mounted in there to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. So In your settings, you'll notice things like cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot, 5G. Each one of these has a separate antenna that is constantly pulsing this man-made radiation. So our message today is not no technology. We live it, we love it, we live by it, but it's high time we be given enough facts to make a balanced decision. Do we actually need to have that Bluetooth antenna on right now? Do we need the Wi-Fi antenna? Do we need the cellular and data that pulls a lot of radiation at us? Or might we just go into settings and start turning things off and only use the one antenna that we need at the time for the shortest amount of time? So we're going to teach you some tricks to really get around this. But you should know that that legal fine print has been in there all along. And that's how the industry has covered their bases. So what I'm going to do right now is stop my slide sharing and do a live demonstration with you. So here in my home, after I stopped circling my tail because I didn't want to know any of this, and I certainly didn't want to believe that this technology came to market with no safety instructions or safety testing even. But here we are. So this is a radio frequency radiation detection meter called the Safe and Sound Pro 2. This was recommended at that EMF medical conference, and doctors and other healthcare practitioners are now putting this into their practice. And here up on the North Shore, we have a Dr. Erin Acevedo who purchased one after she attended the medical conference. And when Dr. Acevedo bought it, she loans it out to her patients. She charges them $10, so everyone puts a little skin in the game and says, you've got 2 hours. Now take this home, do your scavenger hunt, and then come back and tell me where you're getting readings that are not in the green zone, and she will talk them through what they need to do. So here in my home, where I have mitigated, we will see this light up, and right now it's popping between the yellow and the green. I may have somebody in the house here who has some exposure on, or my kids were home for Thanksgiving and maybe something got turned on, but I'm in the yellow here and it pops down between the green and the yellow. Usually I am at like a 3 or a 4, depending on what my neighbors' exposures might be. Um, and watch what happens when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and all those antennas come online. And I am in the flashing red now. Okay. Um, and without doing anything other than turning my cell phone antennas back into active mode, we have gone from, I was at like 60 a moment ago, and now I have maxed this meter out at 3,180,000 microwatts per square meter. So we've gone over 3 million, and now it's fallen back down because I went back into airplane mode. In the scientific literature, they want us to be at 10 or less, 10 microwatts per square meter or less. My home is usually at a 3 or 4, and we just went over 3 million just by turning on one device with its multiple antennas. So that's the invisible exposure that surrounds us until we learn how to take control of it and understand the science, empower ourselves with the facts, and then take care of ourselves first. Try and get information to our loved ones. They're probably not going to want to hear it either. Industry's been very effective at promoting all the benefits of the convenience of wireless technology without sharing the facts on the science. So let me go ahead and resume my screen share, and then we'll get into a little bit more about that. I did want to share, this link is where you can go, and the folks over at Safe Living Technologies are really great. I love this $400 meter because it allows me to show the actual numbers. There is a baby sister one for less than $200. And then there's also another one that will give you not only the radio frequencies, but also the electric and magnetic fields if you are sensitized. you will probably want to know that too. But the folks at Safe Living Technologies have a great help desk, and I recommend that you speak to them before buying a meter, and they can guide you on which one would be most appropriate for you. For our public libraries, I helped Ashland Public Library back in 2016 become the first library in the country to loan out a radio frequency detection meter. And others have seen that pilot and thought, wow, what a great thing to do. Let's get one for our community. So a lot of folks around the country are asking their libraries to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan. And when I first did this in 2016, this totally came out of left field for our library. Now, with the advent of technology, a lot of people don't read books in book form anymore. They might be using, downloads on their devices. So libraries are having to reinvent themselves. And so now most have started a library of things collection. They may already have an air quality meter. They might have a metal detector on loan. They might have games and puzzles. So it's not a stretch today to ask your library to invest in a radio frequency detection meter. We recommend that you get one in the range of about $400 because this is third-party certified, it's calibrated, and it's a good meter. Another library in Massachusetts has one that might be in like the $100 range. And when we put the two devices next to each other, the lesser quality one was missing some of the important signals that you want to capture. So libraries might very well fund this outright. If they need some help, the librarian is invited to contact the Environmental Health Trust. They've got a small library fund available right now. It can't be you and I, it has to be the librarians, but they can help to partially fund this and bring the cost down significantly if needed. That was set to expire in November, and I reached out to the Environmental Health Trust. They do still have some funding left in their pot. So please act swiftly and see if you can get this wonderful tool for your community. Okay, so what is wireless radiation and why should I even care about this? What happened when we went from a corded phone to all of this wireless technology? So if we look at it in terms of the Earth's natural electromagnetic fields, there's a scientist named Schumann who figured out that the Earth pulses a beautiful healing electron every 7.83 seconds, or the scientific name for seconds is hertz. So 7.83 hertz is what we now call Schumann's resonance. That is this beautiful energy that every living thing on the planet is meant to be connected to and synchronized to. So what did we do when we got so fancy and started adopting man-made frequencies? Well, in the megahertz range, we are getting pulsated with microwave radio frequency radiation 1 million times per second. And then we got even fancier and went into the gigahertz range, and we are now pulsating ourselves 1 billion times per second with man-made microwave radiation. So as Dr. Martin Blank and his son R. Blank documented in the earlier book called Overpowered, we are literally overpowering our own biological systems. As Dr. Magda Havas up at Trent University in Canada would say, and she taught EMFs for 25 years up there, our biological cells whisper to each other all day long, sending signals and information. And we are now overpowered by these man-made frequencies. So it's no wonder so many people are tipping into sickness with this. And then Dr. Martin Blank was with Columbia University and has since passed away. His son helped to co-author that book, and his son, R. Blank, has just this year come out with a new book called Empowered, Clear, Practical, and Easy to Act on Solutions in this consumer guide to legitimate EMF protection from Shield Your Body. So we have so many resources today that we never had in the past. So please, Ken and I are not doing this presentation for our fun of it. We're doing it for you, because if we can help you to quickly connect the dots, then you're going to be halfway there already. Then you just need to figure out how to assess your own areas and take meaningful action. So, what is the science telling us? First, we're going to look at the long-term effects, child and adult cancers. So, we have known for many years, as far back as 2016, 2018, and moving forward, that this man-made radio frequency causes cancer. This U.S. National Toxicology Program is part of the National Institutes of Health Sciences or the National Institutes of Health. And they came out with a $30 million study, the largest that they've ever done on any toxin. And they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. So we know this is a carcinogen. The industry will get a hold of these good studies and spin it and say, that's just one more study. You need to have multiple studies. Well, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, right on the heels of our $30 million study, concluded another large study on cell tower base stations, and they found the same things with cancers, DNA damage, and so on. And just this year, a study that was partially funded by the World Health Organization came out and validated these studies and said, yes, there is clear evidence here, high certainty that this causes cancer and other damage. So we don't need more science. We need an educated public to start doing something about this. DNA damage, this is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a child to a pollinator, to a tree, to a biome, to bacteria. When we start damaging DNA, it helps to explain a lot of what we're seeing in our world today. And it was the infertility studies that got me on my feet when I started reading the peer-reviewed scientific literature. And I saw that they've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it caused DNA damage. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it started causing programmed cell death or apoptosis. It was literally killing the sperm in 4 hours of exposure. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. I had just sent my oldest daughter off to college with her MacBook. My youngest was going into high school at the time, and we thought we'd give her a leg up. So for Christmas that year, we gave her a laptop. And where were both of my girls using them, but right on top of their reproductive organs. And subsequently, we now have a great study out of Kaiser Permanente that's never been challenged that shows higher miscarriage rates in women who are using wireless technology. So we have the studies, we have the mechanisms of harm, neurotoxicity. So Dr. Hugh Taylor, who heads up the OBGYN department at Yale Medical School, Dr. Taylor and his colleagues did a study where they exposed pregnant mice to cell phone radiation for a certain number of hours a day. And what they discovered is when the pups came out, they began exhibiting behaviors like a child with attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where the mice were literally bouncing off the walls of the cages, not a care in the world, no focus. So he has a wonderful website called the Baby Safe Project, where parents especially and grandparents can go out and see this beautiful 3-minute video with Dr. Hugh Taylor and colleagues, and also look deeper at the science there. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the autism lab at Mass General Hospital. She is now a retired pediatric neurologist who has founded another project that she's working on that shows we have a total load thing going on, that all these different things are happening to us from chemicals, from bad foods, from air pollution, from water pollution, and all of this toxicity builds up till people hit this tipping point, and the radio frequency radiation is another key player in that. So Dr. Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she continues to work on this issue as well. Alzheimer's disease. So it used to be that Alzheimer's would hit in our 80s or our 90s, maybe. Now we're seeing it in our 70s, our 60s, our 50s, 40s, even 30s, and in rare cases in our 20s. People are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So, as Dr. Martin Blank said, we cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect the outcomes that we once had. So, Dr. Martin Paul has done a wonderful paper on Alzheimer's and what what's happening to our brain. And then one of the major problems we face is that we don't hear enough about this issue in mainstream media. So we're delighted when a well-known group gets funding to put somebody in their organization on this issue. Some of you may already be familiar with the Environmental Working Group. Every year, they are the ones who put out the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list on pesticides in our foods. And they have, in recent years, been putting out fact sheets on the wireless radiation issue. So here's a couple of them: protecting kids from wireless in school and at home, effects of radio frequency radiation on the nervous system. So know your audience. If you know somebody who already has faith in the environmental working group, maybe that's where you start the conversation. Go to this link and pull up their fact sheets there. And we have to be mindful that children are not little adults. Their little bodies are still under construction up until they're 25, maybe even headed toward 30. So, with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his scientific research team, they have done modeling on how much radiation penetrates our brains. As an adult, if you look at these heads turned sideways in the model, that yellow dot is the ear. When we put a cell phone in active mode up to our brain, it's microwaving about a third of our brain. On a 10-year-old child, about three-quarters of the brain, and on a 5-year-old child, that microwave radiation is penetrating almost the entire brain. Their central nervous system is still under construction. Their immune system is still under construction, and this is an immunosuppressant. So we really need to learn about this and step up to protect our collective children. In the short term, the good news is that people say, woof, I didn't want to know about this. I didn't want to believe it because I live on my device. But wow, I took the advice to create a sleep sanctuary, and a lot of these short-term effects began to resolve. So we should know that the Americans with Disabilities Act has long since recognized electromagnetic radiation syndrome, or electrical sensitivities, as they called it back then. But there's never been any teeth put in it, but they have recommendations for how to do accommodations in the workspace and so on. So insomnia is a huge one. And for many years, the industry got away with saying, oh, there's no mechanism of harm, so let's keep doing what we're doing. Well, now we know about the cancers, the infertility, the neurotoxicity, and we also know one of the key factors with insomnia is in the wee hours of darkness, as part of our circadian rhythm, we are beings of light. We operate off of a 24-hour light and dark cycle. In the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland in the brain is meant to release melatonin. Melatonin then goes in and helps to regulate our sleep. It also helps to clean up the toxins of everyday cell repair and regeneration. So melatonin is critical, but what happens is the brain is waiting for darkness. And when we leave these invisible light energy pulsations going all night long, the brain's over there going, when's it going to get dark so I can release the melatonin? So you learn how to mitigate your sleeping areas, and all of a sudden people start sleeping through the night again. It's really simple in its most basic form. Turn off your wireless exposures and let your body cell repair at night and get good sleep. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, even ear bleeds, fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, pain from unidentified sources. Well, we know another thing that is happening. When you look at our blood, either under a high-powered microscope or through ultrasound, we see something happening called rouleau formation. And in my little mind, that sounds an awful lot like the candy Rolos. You know how Rolos come in a stack of chocolate caramels? Well, our red blood cells are meant to be free floating individually to bring oxygen to all of our systems and organs. When we look under that microscope or we look through the ultrasound, instead of free floating, we are magnetizing our red blood cells and they're starting to glom together and they start looking like this chain of red blood cells. And they start looking deformed like bottle caps and they're stuck together. And now they can't get where they need to go to bring oxygen to all of our systems and organs. So that's rouleau formation. And as our doctors will tell us, it's causing oxidative stress and reactive oxygen species. Oxidative stress is a precursor to most chronic illnesses today. So we clean up our environment and we see a lot of improvement with this. And then there's the skin abnormalities. So you know how the birds and the bees have these systems built into their beaks and their brains that help them to stay synchronized to the earth. And so they can get where they need to go through the electromagnetic frequencies that help them to navigate. Well, we being one of these little critters on the earth too, we have like little antennas in the surface of our skin. And so when we are hit with man-made radio frequencies, sometimes that causes a distortion in our skin. And we start hearing about people who say, oh, gee, I get the hot ear when I have that cell phone up to my head. Or people start getting rashes and flushing and like a burning sensation. And that's our body saying, hey, yo, something's not right here. Even just walking around outside, if it's too hot, it's those little antennas that tell us you better get in and cool down. Or if it's too cold, you're going to risk hypothermia. So you better get indoors. Well, now those little antennas are telling us that we are getting bombarded with microwaves, and that is not safe for us. And all of our big organs, our brain, our hearts, our lungs, operate off of this natural electrical circuitry. And when we overpower ourselves, we get irregular heartbeats, palpitations, arrhythmias, chest pain, difficulty breathing. Some people will say it feels like somebody's sitting on their chest and they just can't get their breath. And others start to have fluctuations in their blood pressure, too high or too low, depending on your individual proclivity. And then cognitive impairment. It used to be as we aged, we'd open up the fridge and go, what did I come in here for? It's not just happening to the elderly now. This cognitive impairment where we can't carry our thoughts through is happening to people at all ages, including children. And one of the hardest things to hear at the EMF medical conference was if we don't get ahead of this, we can expect many more of these societal outbursts that we've been seeing because we are physiologically changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain in the areas where we would have executive functioning to make sound decisions. And when we start damaging those parts of the brain, we are inclined to see more anger, more behavior issues. And I was so sad to see news broadcasts here in the Boston market once we sent the kids back to school after the COVID pandemic, because we had issued every child a wireless device with no safety instruction. And multiple nights on the news, I saw these different school districts in Boston reporting that children were literally beating on their classmates with their tablet because they could no longer regulate their emotions and their behavior. And we sent them home for 2 years with a wireless tablet that they, in many homes, were given free rein on because mom and dad were so busy just trying to figure out how to earn a living and homeschool the kids. And so we are seeing these anger issues in our society. It's not if it will happen, it is happening right now. Anger, depression, suicidal ideation. We were at epidemic levels of this even before the pandemic, and it's only getting worse. We are polluting the brain with microwaves. So some people love to jump right in and look at the science, and you will find all of the science on my website and through these links. Some people like to hear other people's experiences. We do a World Electromagnetic Radiation Syndrome Day event every year with colleagues around the world. And if you want to go hear from people that were involved in ours from 2025, we ask people to keep their statements to about 2 minutes each. And so you will hear from 15 or 20 people on how this is impacting their lives directly. So that's the science. I just kept wondering, well, if this is as bad as we can see when we start reading the literature, why don't we know about this? Then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this incredible free online report called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates, but they're not regulating that. We have a revolving door, as the cover of the report shows, between the industry and our federal agencies. There are some in there now who are trying to clean it up, but it's going to take years. In the meantime, the FCC, the FDA, the CDC, the EPA, these have all been taken over by industries that are promoting their priorities and not protecting public health. So, you're welcome to jump in here. Sadly, it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. They have reopened an investigation because back in 2011, they determined this radio frequency was a group 2B possible human carcinogen. What was missing in 2011 were these animal studies that we now have from the Ramazzini Institute and the National Toxicology Program that now show clear evidence this is causing cancer and worse. But they have not updated their classification. They have reopened the investigation, but sadly, there are conflicts of interest all the way up through the World Health Organization and beyond. There's a group there that is largely industry funded, and it looks like they may have gotten a hold of this investigation as well. So we're getting poor reports once again out of the World Health Organization. So feel free to look around at those links. So let's start thinking about what we can do. And the first step is to start looking around and saying, gee, where am I getting exposed with these invisible radio frequency signals? The industry, if they have their way, is forecasting that in our homes, we will all have 200 wirelessly connected devices for 5G and the Internet of Things. They are spinning that up as the next best thing since sliced bread. I don't know about you, but I don't want 200 things in my home pulsating me with microwaves. So all of our smartphones and Bluetooth technologies use this. Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, all the routers, cordless phones and cordless headsets, tablets, laptops, printers, mice, keyboards, all of these gaming devices. And please don't put a virtual reality device right up on your head, and certainly not on a child's head. Baby monitors. It's like having a cell tower right there in bed with your baby. Smart hearing aids puts a Bluetooth transmitter right up inside your head. So this is where we are today. But let's learn what we can do, baby steps, step by step, to find a better option for each one of these things. And everything wearable, all you got to do is put it in airplane mode and turn off those antennas. Anything that's downloaded onto any of your devices is there to use without the radio frequency radiation. So the idea is not to get rid of technology. It's to get to what the Centers for Disease Control calls the ALARA principle. Let's get to as low as reasonably achievable, the ALARA principle. And here's what we can start doing. It's a 3-step process. First, flip your router around. You'll find that you still have Ethernet ports on there. Get a big, long Ethernet cable. If you have to buy one, look for one that's shielded. That will contain the dirty electric and magnetic fields that might be pulsating out of that. But again, not terribly expensive, 30 bucks or so. Most of us have more than one device that we'd like to connect. So Look for something called an Ethernet switch. This is one that I have in my home. In a classroom, you can get one that has 20 or 30 ports on it to hook up everybody. And then just get individual cables that hook up to each device through an adapter, plug in the adapter to your device. So that's what we mean when we say hardwiring or connecting with cables. So that's the first step. The second step is you have to go find the antennas in your router and in each one of your devices in the settings and go in and just turn each one of those devices off. And then you better measure because, like I said, they are starting to put these antennas in just about every electronic device that you buy. And in many cases, there are multiple antennas. So you might think you got it turned off, but you really need to measure. And for those who joined us late, there are library programs in our earlier slides that you'll receive that can give you encouragement to get a meter either for yourself or through your local library. So it shouldn't break the bank for most people to hardwire, maybe around the $100, $200 mark, depending on how many accoutrements you need. But it is definitely doable with the devices under our own control. So then what do we do at the community level with all this electro pollution? We started with cell towers in industrial parks, 300 feet in the air, far away from anybody. And then they started encroaching and bringing those big macro antennas closer and closer. And the industry set up the laws with our government such that, hey, if you can make it blend in aesthetically, well, we can just put them anywhere we want. So now we start seeing them on top of buildings, slapped up the sides of buildings, hidden behind facades on buildings. And that is a really toxic exposure. Now with 5G small cells, this is what some of them look like, a little thimble. Sometimes they're just mounted on the wires. Sometimes they're stuck under manhole covers. They're pretty sneaky about where they're putting them, but there's nothing small about the radiation that comes through with that. 5G does not operate unto its own. This is fifth generation technology that relies on the backbone of third generation, fourth generation, and even second generation. So 2G, 3G, 4G is all bundled up in 5G, and every company's doing it differently. So there are no standards for this. It's like the wild, wild west out there. So those are getting closer and closer to where we live, work, play, worship, even go to medical facilities, and industry has started putting them in their closets. Then we have the satellites launching by the thousands that are beamforming this radiation down to devices to connect with here on Earth. And then these wireless access points are getting mounted in our offices, in our schools. And if you flip them over, though, they do have a couple of Ethernet ports, so you could turn off the wireless component, drop wires down to task level, and use them more safely. And then what we're going to talk at great length with Ken are these utility smart meters that pulse this microwave radiation into our living spaces 24/7. So I'll do a very quick overview of what the smart meters are, and then we will turn it over to Ken to give us the real details on this. So many of them pulse this microwave radiation continuously throughout the day and night. This radio frequency, one of the properties is that it amplifies around metal. So if you've got radio frequency pulsations, they can literally hop on the wiring in the pipes at your house if it's not mitigated or installed properly and turn your whole home into what becomes a giant antenna. And then there are far too many reports of these things being improperly installed, where we get power surges that cause fires and explosions, improper grounding. And it's not like you can just call your fire department, they come down and hose it off. Where you have an electrical fire, you can't put a hose on that because it's going to electrocute the firefighter. You have to get through to your the fire department has to get through to the electric company, get them to turn off the power from their end. That could take up to an hour. And then you've got this risk on a windy day of that fire leaping from home to home in the woods and everything around you. So these meters are not smart on any level. And there's a lot of people who are very concerned about data harvesting and privacy issues because whenever you send data wirelessly, your data is flying through the air for anybody with a $100 app out at the curb to snag. And they can take your data and know your patterns when everybody leaves the house, when they can back up their truck and take your toys. So it's a bad deal on many, many fronts. And at the EMF Medical Conference, they said that along with these cell towers getting installed at close range, when these smart meters go in, they see a great uptick in people who are presenting with symptoms for electromagnetic radiation syndrome. This is also an environmental justice issue. Industry rolls into town, installs their toxic products on top of unsuspecting people in low income, language barrier communities. And then they'll turn around and go, hey, look, our pilot worked so well here, as they did in Worcester, Massachusetts. Look, New York, look, Rhode Island. This worked out so great. Massachusetts is rolling this out all across the state. So you guys should get on the bandwagon and do it too. So this is a raw deal for our communities. There are some excellent TED Talks available. 15 minutes. Jeremy Johnson and was an engineer out in Silicon Valley, and his wife is a medical doctor. They both started developing these sudden symptoms and couldn't figure out what was going on until they figured out that a bank of smart meters had been put on their condo, and it made them both very, very sick. So Jeremy gives a really good TED talk on this, as does Dr. Alexia McKnight, who works with man-made radiation as a equine veterinarian. She works, she's a radiologist. She had no idea that these low-level man-made radio frequencies were this harmful until a smart meter went on her home. And she became so neurotoxic that she was driving her daughter home from dance one day and got to an intersection and could no longer recall whether that red light meant stop or go, or that green light meant stop or go. It was a 50-50 proposition. And thank goodness she made the right decision and got home. But she finally tracked it back to that smart meter and got it mitigated. And then all her symptoms started clearing up. So feel free to share these, watch these to continue learning on this. So I am going to stop the screen share for a moment, and we're going to turn this over to Ken, and I'm going to spotlight him for this part of the presentation. Okay.
All right.
So Ken, thank you once again for joining us. And I will go back into the slides, and Ken will just be so kind as to tell me when to advance.
Indeed.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we're going to start with how we know some smart meters are harmful.
Yeah. So before I begin, I'll just thank Cece for giving a good technology foundation. Now, at the bottom line, we're trying to help people live safely with technology. It's one thing when you're in control and can make decisions, whether you use a phone, whether you let your kids have an iPad. But as she mentioned, there's a lot of electro-polluting infrastructure beyond your reach, and some of it is intimate in your space, and smart meters are are the quintessential example of that. So I want to just preface this and say I am not a lawyer, I am not a doctor, I am not an electrician, and I'll have to say I'm not an optimist, but we'll do my best because we want to have positive solutions. But this is a complicated problem. I love it when we have somebody who is ill, fixes something, and immediately does well. But the larger percentage of people are, by the time they sink low enough to reach the conclusions, they're sunk pretty deep. And this isn't something you unwind easily. If you nip it in the bud, if you know your body well enough and you have only a single problem, you might unwind more easily. But really, so many of my clients have so many simultaneous problems, and smart meters are definitely a part of the journey, not the only part, but they're today's topic, so we're going to focus on that. So for this slide, we're going to do some questions and answers to see if we learned something. So how do we know smart meters are harmful? Was it done by careful testing by the manufacturers? No. Um, was it done by careful testing by regulatory authorities? No. Was it people voicing their illness to doctors? Yes. How about people testifying about the illness to local government? Yes. People responding to detailed surveys telling their stories? Yes. And researchers identifying harmful aspects of some meters? Yes. So a lot of it is anecdotal information. It didn't come from fundamental science, although fundamental science can learn that certain aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum can run counter to us, we who are electromagnetic beings. The fact that there is interference with man-made electrical energies should be assumed, not have to be proven. This stuff, by design, it would be irritating. So please prove to me how it isn't irritating. And it's never put that way. We have a innocent until proven guilty, just like we have for chemical pollutants. It's not the right model. It's what how society works. And if you slow down to test, everyone says you're slowing down progress. But there isn't even testing in parallel. They don't want to test because if they test, they might have to explain why there's a problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, so let's look a little bit of detail. So when I visit a person's house as part of the normal measurement process, I like to look at a certain region of the electromagnetic spectrum between 902, 928 megahertz, which all meters in America use. Different countries have different ranges for that, but all of the ones at least use this frequency. So by looking here, I will know that um, I won't know whether it is an electric smart meter, uh, water, gas, or any of the other ones that behave similar for utility usage, but I can tell it's one of those. And so I'm just going to give you the quickest outline. This is a spectrum analysis, and the magenta lines represent the maximum peak. So they caught some part of a signal, and the green trace represents the lowest that's been seen. And the difference between those, uh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is at least a factor of 100,000 times in strength because there's no signal, and then there's a signal, and then this is captured. In the bottom part of the trace, there is a blue region, and this is a history of about the last 10 seconds. And every time we have a little white hyphen, that indicates that some part of a message was caught by the spectrum analyzer as it's looking. So at this person's house, a lot of stuff is going on, and it isn't necessarily from the house, but the whole neighborhood. The way smart meters that broadcast are implemented, they can easily send their signal 400 or 500 yards. That's in a suburban environment. That's a lot of neighbors whose information might be popping through your house. So we take these kinds of measurements to give us an idea of the load, and then we scratch our heads. And of course, you can always work on the smart meter that's on the property if it's a single standalone house. Gets harder if it's in a shared housing arrangement or there's a bank of meters. These are effectively out of your control, very difficult to deal with in any proactive way. So there are different strategies, but they're not as good as the person who may have a standalone house. But even if we're able to maybe block the radio frequency from being visible in the house from that instrument, sometimes the numbers don't look any different because it's coming from other places. The question is, we always believe in this linear dose model that a lot is bad and a little bit less bad. But we don't know about the thresholds that the body responds to. If you model the body as a bag of saline, like the physicists and the electrical engineers do, you you think of it as a hunk of meat. But in reality, our bodies have all sorts of amplifying mechanisms to take little things and make a big deal of it. Um, and this could be a case that the constant, every 15-second bip, bip, bip can just drive you crazy. But we all know people who respond differently to when your smoke alarms are running low on battery. That goes and clicks every 60 seconds. You know that you have some people who will ignore it, and 6 months later you mention it to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I should change that battery." And there are other people that after the third beep, they are screaming to do something about it. We as humans handle our environment in different ways. The smart meter is going to rattle some chains about certain biologies. It's not good for anyone, but for some people, it's acutely a pathway to a health downfall. In many cases, making it difficult for people to live in their house or have any kind of relationship to electricity. So, next slide, please. I did a research of testimonials. I love reading testimonials from people. I read more than 450 of the testimonials, and I gathered up all of the symptoms that I saw over and over and over again. I kept a tally, and then I made a document, and Cece will provide that document as part of the follow-up to the people who registered. But I ended up with about 80 symptoms and conditions that are made worse, that people said, I didn't have this and now I have this, or I had this and it got worse. And so I made a little bingo card so you could keep track of symptoms at home because they don't all arrive on one day, if ever. And a lot of them come from many different kinds of lifestyle choices or happenstances. So having a constellation of symptoms can get you a better feel for whether electromagnetics, in particular smart meters, because I was reading people who say they got injured by smart meters. So just to do the quick run through of these, um, cardiac and our sensory organs are really high on the list. Feelings of unwellness like nauseation and fatigue, exhaustion and stress, agitations, anxiety, irritability, bickering and arguing. These are all signs. When these are not previously present and you find you just can't turn it off, this may be what's happening. Not getting good sleep, insomnia, sleeplessness, this can just take you down to a dark place because your sleep cycle is when the melatonin is fixing your issues of the day, and also your body is left in its most undefended state. You're not prepared to deal with assaults at this time. This is a bad time. Uh, Obviously, electrical engineers are not really taught proper things about biology. Otherwise, you wouldn't say, let's run all this stuff in the middle of the night. Nobody will know, when in fact, it's the absolute worst time to run these things. So, involuntary muscle contractions and leg cramps, especially in bed, not being able to think straight in any of the normal ways. This is the forgetting things, or you're always in a fog, or you can't hold on to short memory, can't concentrate. Headaches. A lot of people have headaches that are very localized, not general headaches, but in particular places. The eternal ringing in the ears, um, various kinds of shooting pains, tingling in the extremities or along the nerve places. Um, Breathing problems. It's kind of a surprise, but a lot of people can have breathing problems. And I just feel that a lot of the CPAP usage is going to be traced to a lot of electromagnetic sources. Now, these symptoms are not exclusive to smart meters. They just triggered because smart meter is such an intense trigger, an inciting event. But Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and other things might well cause these same symptoms. But we're talking smart meters, and this is where I got the testimonials. Next slide, please. So just in the building, we just want to know we live in the building. It doesn't really matter what the smart meter is doing outside, but the kinds of things we typically see there are four. One is almost all of them will use a radio frequency broadcast scheme. So there's going to be broadcasting all the time, and some percentage of that ends up in the house. It's often many thousands of times per day. It's usually once or twice per minute, 1,440 minutes per day. So right at the get-go, you have a couple of thousand per day, and sometimes it's worse. Um, there's dirty electricity created, and this dirty electricity is electromagnetic interference, the old style buzz that you would get on your AM radio, that kind of unfortunate side effect of modern electronics. It gets impressed onto the electrical wiring of your house, where your wiring is a cage that you live in. There are several thousand feet of wiring in a typical house, and you can have this emanating like it's a broadcast. These are antennas that can broadcast it. So the yuckier frequencies that get impressed by a smart meter, which is particularly pernicious because it has its hands on your electrical system as it enters your house. Unlike your computer, which can create dirty electricity and it's fairly localized, it does send it into the house. The dirty, like the smart meters, the electronic meters will put potentially put it on all the wiring of the house. That's not great. Um, there are It's not as big an issue in Massachusetts, but I do know that Unitil had used this feature here. Um, Sometimes they do not use radio frequency, but instead specifically put energy on the wires through something called power line carrier or broadband over power lines. And this is essentially putting dirty electricity on the wire, but it's meant to go all the way back to the phone company. So on one side, you don't have radio frequency, and on the other side, you have the dirty electricity. And many people find they're affected by it, and it's much harder to shield against than the radio frequency is. Radio frequency is not that hard to shield against. Um, it's hard, but it's not nearly as hard as getting rid of stuff that's on the wires. And the last thing is there are some aspects of acoustical vibration in some cases. This is very rare, but it's sort of the fourth demerit that sometimes shows up when a meter is installed and people feel unwell is that the thing is vibrating. Like you'll hear a transformer vibrating sometimes. It's the plates going back and forth it's kind of a mechanical thing. And sometimes the the electrical system will cause a buzz that in relation to having the smart meter. So there's there, there are so many kinds of smart meters, and just we're using the term smart meter very fast and loose here. Um, that I'm using it for anything that's an electronic meter that broadcasts. There's some terminology that splits the difference, and that some of the meters we've had for the last 5 or 10 years are called AMR, automated meter reading meters. So they may go off once a month when a truck goes by with a meter reader, or they may be spouting out every 30 seconds. So I'm talking about the ones that are spouting at every 30 seconds. The ones that dutifully wait till once a month, they're not an issue. That's why nobody complained for decades and decades about any of this stuff. It's only when they started putting in the ones that have this mesh network where they use a communication strategy that just flings the data out. It doesn't actually establish a relationship with a communication partner. So it flings it out and hopes that it will eventually get to the power company. And the meters are implemented such that they are both listening and sending. So your neighbor's meter is listening for broadcasts from you and the other neighbors and will forward that information along the chain. So there are many ways the same information is sent. So it's redundant, but then they will eventually get information about you. But it's overkill. It could be done many different ways, but this was the cheap and easy way, one imagines. So here is a list of a way to gauge whether a certain smart meter is more injurious or not. It was written about more than 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and the world has changed even since this was written. There are other kinds of meters. The ones we're talking about are in the red column, the ones with the fives and the fours. That's the kind of stuff that we're seeing being deployed across Massachusetts. We just recently learned that the National Grid meter, of which they have permission to put in 1.4 million of them. So that's pretty much everyone in their customer base is a real beaut, a real painful five on this scale. So we're going to stay tuned, and I've already gotten one emergency call on this, um, and I imagine we're going to get quite a few more as this makes the rounds in 2026, because that's when it's all scheduled to go down. Next slide, please. So we talk about smart meters as if it's one thing. It's a thing. It's a TV. It's easy to understand. There isn't. As the next three slides show, there are 10 different natural gas providers in Massachusetts. Cece. 45 different electric companies in Massachusetts, and more than 300 water authority districts in Massachusetts. Every one of them makes an independent decision on the kinds of metering that they are going to have. All of them are selecting what we now call smart meters, the ones that are broadcasting all the time and often have a two-way communication strategy where they're both listening from the mothership, things like turn this off because this guy hasn't paid his bill, to more integration into the home, to time-based rate paying, all sorts of different quote unquote benefits that have been sold to each one of these districts on how they're going to save the planet and save money. They've all been sold smart meters. They're all different. So we can't generalize. Each time someone calls me, it's all something new. Now, often they're going to have selected a similar meter as 50 other towns, but I don't know what it is until we arrive. Each one of them, we hope, offers an opt-out program where the at least the radio frequency part can be turned off, perhaps for a small fee, but realistically, very few of them do. And every person who asks meets a wall where they're told, "You're the first person we've ever heard from. No, we're not going to do anything." And this is not truth. This is uh, this is part of what is sometimes known as the tobacco playbook, and different ways of telling you, don't believe your lying eyes. You couldn't possibly be ill from these. These past uh, FCC certification. These are by definition healthful, and this is beyond silly because the FCC only looks at a very small aspect of any device, and there are whole regions of the electromagnetic spectrum it doesn't look at all, and as if your biology takes a break when it gets down to a certain level. It's not how it works. It's a childish argument, but it has the authority of law, and you know, whatever. It's unfair all the way through. Next slide, please. So because so many different models are available and they all have their own technology, it's hard to get a handle on what we can do about it. each utility is effectively a monopoly in their district. There's rare the case that you have two different gas suppliers you can choose from, or two different electric suppliers, and never two different water suppliers. So they get to do whatever they want, and they tend to play hardball. They're intolerant of people who want to opt out. They're inflexible, and they say, "You don't want the water? You don't get the meter, you don't get the water. You don't get our meter, you don't get the electricity." You have very little bargaining position in this. And the documentation about every one of the meters is always withheld from public scrutiny. And I include a little example here of the one that National Grid is deploying right now. There's a very polite letter filed among it that says, "We respectfully request confidentiality of the documents that say how this thing works." Because if we were to tell the public, uh, the world might fall apart because someone might copy our design and we would lose a lot of money. So instead of us being able to know what these are capable of, when we describe what a smart meter does, it is it is a it is a guess, an educated guess, but we do not know what's in there. It's a black box. They can get updated on the field. Many people say that they aren't even being billed properly. There's some percentage of people who report that their bills went up 30% after a meter upgrade. And everyone will look at that and say, unless there's an actual real mechanical problem or bum meter, they're going to say, well, you've been lucky. You've been underbilled for all these years. That's the line. Instead of saying it's not open to scrutiny, it's not even like at the gas station where there's a sticker that says this pump has been inspected by this inspector. You don't get anything. You have no idea how this works or doesn't work or has a bug, and they won't be telling you this. You're not a partner in this. You're a commodity, and it's unfortunate in all the different ways that unfairness plays. Cece. So what can we do? We can do many, many, many things. So the first thing to do is do nothing. Doing nothing is easy and it isn't harmful, but you got to be vigilant. You have to pay attention. Your house configuration might be such that the smart meter is on the other side of the garage. Circumstances are such that it just doesn't seem to impinge on you in any way that is as high as 10 other things you could list in your lifestyle. So, yeah, it might be affecting you, but that running around in that Tesla car might be hurting you a lot more. And so you prioritize things, you pay attention. That's why the little checklist is being provided so that you and can track for each of your family members and your pets what's going on. Somebody's suddenly lethargic or getting aggressive in school or whatever, mark it down, and at least you have something to take with you to the doctor instead of a whole bunch of random facts that you may or may not remember. We have to be vigilant and then take action when we need to. So, the smart meters are installed where the meters are, and the meters were installed wherever the architect or the electrician arranged it on the day the house was built. So nobody asks, is there a bedroom on the other side? Is there an invalid? Is there a convalescing person? Is there a baby? Is there a pregnant woman on the other side of that meter? Nobody's going to ask you. They're just going to change it. So you might just abandon that room next to the meter if you have other rooms to spare and just give it a wide berth. Distance is your friend in many things related to radio frequency. That might take the edge off in a way that again costs nothing except the loss of a whole room in your house for anything other than storage. These are not all great solutions. Some are better than others, but they should be looked at as strategies. The next. You could ask the utility whether they have a safer opt-out. They won't understand the term safer because, of course, it's perfectly safe by definition. But you could ask for opt-out, and they might not understand what that phrase means either. So you may have to spell it out. I want one that's as close um, to the one I had before, or had in the old days. But as far as in Massachusetts, as far as you're going to get is almost always going to be no RF. So it'll still be an electric meter, and it just won't emanate RF signals. That's the opt-out that National Grid provides. That's about the best. There just isn't going to be a case that you're going to get them to put an analog meter on. Just isn't going to happen. Um, why? Well, capitalism. After 10 or 15 years of not ordering any new analog electromechanical meters, there is no manufacturer in America that I'm aware of that makes them. So they just say, we can't get them. So, but you can also ask, no, this is good. So you can ask if there's any antenna connection port that allows you to run a wire to put the antenna further away from your home. The ones in Europe include an antenna collection. Some of the ones connection. Some of the ones in America do. I don't know of any in Massachusetts that do, but you could ask. You'll almost always be told nothing, 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 and you got to work hard. So Cece will be talking about the opt-out, excuse me, the opt-out situation later at the end of this. So you can ask the utility, look, can I just upload a photo of my meter once a month? This should never be denied. It will always be denied. So this is part of what's unfair. Of course, all they need to do is get the information to bill you, but they will tell you 50 ways from Sunday why this simple solution is impractical and unavailable. They cannot possibly figure this out, yet they will tell you that they are on top of everything. They're making this grid faster, stronger, better, but they can't do, a weekend's worth of work to do this. So ask, get a record, because you may be finding yourself trying to file paperwork with the utility, some certified letters, some legal action, something for your legislators. You need evidence. So ask the questions, get the response, keep good records. Um, uh, the an educated consumer is our best customers, sort of how to think of that. So uh, another way is to surround, redirect, or shield any of the antennas that are inside the smart meter to protect the living space. And this is one bullet, but it's a whole bunch of different options that'll be discussed on the next slide. So, I mean, it may sound radical, but how about considering weaning your use from natural gas so you're no longer a gas customer? Or do the same for being a water customer of that utility. These are not options that are available to everyone, but rather than have your health fail or try to make a protracted legal argument or insist on fairness doctrines, your health is more important. If you don't have good health, you don't have as much as you think. So don't don't if you're starting to have a health crisis, please concentrate on the health crisis and do what you can to um, avoid this technological conundrum that we've been placed in. A practical solution, though an expensive one, and one that's much easier when you build a new house to set up the first time, is put the electric meter on a pedestal. Now, we do say the gas and the water meter, they are harmful as well, but the electric meter is the real queen here. This is the one that's harmful in two major dimensions, both the radio frequency and the dirty electricity. The gas and the water meter will be a radio frequency only consideration. So if you nip the radio frequency, you don't get the dirty electricity because they run from battery and they don't attach to the power system in the house. But having a pedestal, a freestanding support structure up 30 feet or more from the house with the meter facing away from the house, you probably don't have to think much of it. Now, we do say that the dirty electricity can come in the house from that, and the wiring distance doesn't improve it that much. So there are circumstances where there's still more work to be done, but the radio frequency will not be something you have to think about again. Um, and when you have dirty electricity in your house, and the smart meter is not the only source of it. I mean, everything that's an electronic, everything that's a green technology produces dirty electricity, primarily because the technology that makes efficiency generates high frequencies, and because the almighty dollar prevents engineers from actually cleaning that mess up before it leaves the device and infects the rest of the house. For want of a $5 part, it is contended that most smart meters could be made much safer b- by their design, approximately $5 or less. The alternative is someone may have to spend several $1,000s of their own money to reduce dirty electricity with a whole house filter, which will be a hit or miss proposition. This is all about poor engineering based on poor information, but it's poor engineering at the end of the day. All right, next slide, please. I don't have a good story for people who are apartment dwellers or in shared housing where they happen to be the unlucky one adjacent to a bank of 20 or 30 meters of any kind. It's you might be able to throw a blanket over it and hope that they don't take the blanket off, constantly spending time doing this. But everyone that I know who's been in that situation, they had a rapid health decline once they were upgraded to a more pernicious meter, like pets and people. Um, it's not a good situation. Relocation is an option, but Massachusetts doesn't make that easy because there isn't so much housing, and many people are on lists that were difficult to get the housing they have. See previous discussion on unfairness. I'm not saying there are no solutions, but I don't want to give false hope. This is you're fighting too much. Your health is too important. Do whatever trade-offs you need to have in life to make the proper calculus. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this slide here, we're going to discuss. We often see people putting a cover or a shield over the face of their meter. And it's important to understand when that shielding is effective and when it probably won't be effective. So let's go through these points. So most of the airborne radio frequency that comes from now this whole slide assumes that you don't have an opt-out, that you just have the ones that are broadcasting radio frequency. If you have an opt-out, you don't need to put a shield on. It won't do anything because there's nothing emanating. But in the case of the normal um, as installed, the airborne RF radio frequency comes through the plastic or the glass primarily. The bulk metal that's around the back will diminish it greatly, but does not eliminate. So there's RF that gets pushed directly into your house, and that's bouncing into your house. All of it is yucky, but most of it is shooting out the glass. So next slide. Next, yeah. When you cover that housing, that plastic housing with a shield of some kind, it will reduce emanations in that direction. Next. But it may increase the emanations back into the house because most shield material is reflective of microwave signals. It's not purely reflective like a pure mirror would be, but it's mostly reflective. It's not dissipative and it's not absorptive. So there's the only three choices in life is it's reflective and it reflects back. In fact, these signals bounce all the time. The microwave signals, their inherent nature is to bounce off things. The cell phone companies rely on them bouncing off random things. The smart meter guys too. You know, they there is not a line of sight. You don't go from point A to point B. It's going to bounce off a lot of things en route to its destination, and the receivers can pick up imperceptibly small signals. So it can do a lot of bouncing and dissipation before it's useless, but it can still be harmful well well along the way. So one of the big problems, and this is very difficult to diagnose. I don't have it's an expensive equipment piece that you need. But these 900 megahertz signals can get pushed onto the wiring of your house inside that meter socket. And when you bounce the signal back, it is has even more likely to be impressed on there. So now you have these microwave signals traveling on the wires of your house, and that's no longer dirty electricity. That's high stuff. It's like having AM, FM radio traveling on the wires and emanating back out. There are some of my clients who are very, very sensitive, and they insist that they feel things coming off the wiring that I can't measure, and I can measure the low frequency and I can't measure the high frequency. I know other building biologists who have the $10,000 pieces of equipment, and they have confirmed that they have seen it, though not every time. It all depends on way too many things that we don't know about. Continue. So when is covering with a shield a good idea? So this is when, say, your house is L-shaped and the meter is in a place that its face ends up coming into your house. That was the problem in our house, is that the meter was there, and where the uh, ill sweetheart sat, we later, with a good quality meter, were able to find that the utility meter was pulsing continuously into um, that wingback chair with all the metal lattice work that just concentrated it right there. Next. If the meter is located on the interior of the home, a water meter is the example that's always going to be the case. You don't want that emanating everywhere. So you want to put some kind of shielding. This isn't the same thing where it's the face of a meter, but something as inglorious as the as aluminum foil that you've wrapped around it and left one place for the signal to head out of the house, and hope that you have mostly redirected whatever elsewhere and not to the place above and the place to the side, which may be a bedroom. We always say trust but verify. The meter, the green meter that Cece showed earlier, is the Cadillac. It's the best prosumer meter. It's expensive, but it for people who need to be very careful about the lowest levels, this is the meter to have. We have one going all the time in my electrically sensitive sweetheart's area. She can tell if somebody inadvertently walks into the house with a device and I didn't sweep them fast enough. She can be on top of that and run to protect herself by putting on some protective garb and shrieking loudly to get somebody's attention, because it hurts quite a bit. 10 seconds of exposure could give her an hour of misery later. So so the meter often faces a driveway that you have to walk in to get to your car, or your garden, or a patio, a place you want to spend time. These are cases where you would put a cover on. It would protect your outdoor area. Continue. Also, if you have a neighbor that you like, or they asked you politely to, could your meter not be blasting my house, you might choose to put one on as well. There's a financial trade-off. If you opt out, you don't have to do anything about these kinds of shielding. But if you don't opt out, you might put that 20 to $30 a month toward some high-end shielding and save money. You know, after the first year, you're going to be paying this 20 or $30 a month in perpetuity. It's not up to the same level as a kid's college education, but it's not that far away. So you really you do what you got to do in crisis, but the longer term planning, it's there are some trade-offs. So there are kinds of electric meter shields. They might reduce things by a factor of 10, 50, 100. In some cases, more than 1,000 reduction, which, okay, keep going, please. So the cheapest is to just take some aluminum not plastic, aluminum mesh screening, about 14 inches by 14 inches in size. Take a $1 6.5 inch hose clamp, cover the meter, put the hose clamp on it, tighten it up. There you go. That's the cheapest shield you can put on. You don't have to buy anything from anyone. Um, it will not block. Very few of these shields will block the signal so much that the power company will come by and say, "Well, what happened to your meter?" Because if the power company comes by, they'll just take this stuff off, either take it or throw it away. They are not very keen on seeing stuff on their meters. A cover like this doesn't obscure the reading in case somebody wants to read it, but the next one would be, I don't know if you've ever seen these adjustable elbows. They're ductwork that's 6 inches in diameter and lets you, um, it's articulated to move in several different directions. It lets you make an L if you want to, or another angle. It's for plumbers to hook things up when the angles are funny. You could put that on your meter and sort of, it has an open end. So it's a big metal tube that's open-ended and can move to a degree. You might be able to have it bend so the open end faces the street and not toward your driveway. And that's like a $10 thing to try. It might just do the trick. Um, there are some soft kinds of guards. They usually have elastic and it's a fabric material that's meshwork. Those are normally $30. You can get the next level up, which is a harder um, aluminum screening with a metal skeleton. Those are closer to 60. I'm sorry, it's less than six, and it's less than 60. Uh, and then you can go way up to the highest end. So you might have the premium that I know about is something called an Iron Maiden, and it's made by Bill Bathgate at DE Filters LLC, and it's about $500. But it covers the meter, it screws in over the top, and it has like $200 worth of microwave absorbing foam in it. So it's not bouncing it back into your house nor onto your wires. It's eating it, turning it into a little bit of heat. Some people um, find it has made a huge difference, but it's $500. He does give a 30-day money back guarantee. So it's expensive, but it's one of those Cadillac solutions, and then you don't have to think about it. So trade-offs. And a more expensive but solution is to have the freestanding pedestal in the yard, and that'll often cost between $5,000 and $10,000. There'll be excavation and trenching. There'll be at least one utility pole. There'll be very expensive wiring run underground. This does eliminate the overhead wiring that also annoys some people. Like they can't enjoy their outside of their house because there's wiring right over the driveway, or example, once they get sensitive. So how do we know if or suspect that we've improved the situation? There are two ways. One is take measurements inside the home. So often we see people doing the measurements outside the home. I don't know what that's supposed to do because you're not living there. You should do it where you're living. And measure before and after and get an idea of whether it has diminished sufficiently. If it hasn't, it might not be applied properly. It might be that there's another meter that is in that's the one that you should have covered, but it wasn't in your mind's eye because this is all invisible. You might be covering the electric meter and it's the water meter that's really, really blasting the house. There's a lot of back and forth. When I get involved with people, we run it to ground more quickly. All right, and if the electrically sensitive person affirms they feel better, you have won. If you have an electrically sensitive person, that is the ultimate arbiter of all of this. I'm going to give it back to Cece for a bunch of slides.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much. Such great intel on what we can do. when we're handed this bad hand of cards here. So Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that when we finally make important changes in our world, it comes through three channels. The public learns and gets engaged, and that's what we're hoping to provide tonight is the encouragement to figure this out and then see what you can do to help protect your community. It goes through the courts, and then public policy finally catches up, in this case, to the science. So I'm just going to show you a few slides. When you receive the slides and the recording, you're more than welcome to do the deeper dive into them, but we just want to give you kind of the lay of the land of what you might want to look at. So, medical and professional solutions. This is something that people are now able to access. We talked about the EMF Medical Conference at the beginning of our presentation today. Dr. Cindy Russell, Dr. Joel Moskowitz, and others have established a website called Physicians for Safe Technology. So, know that you can refer your own healthcare practitioners to these websites to start learning about this issue. And for the other professionals like engineers, physicists, technologists, architects, etc., when we were down speaking at the National Institutes of Health, there was a call for papers, and Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada pulled together a lot of scientists, doctors, and building biologists, and they came up with a wonderful paper called Building Science and Radio Frequency Radiation, What Makes Smart and Healthy Buildings. So these are resources that we can all use today to start down the road of learning and then mitigation. And our schools have really become a very unhealthy environment with all of the radiation exposures that are there today. We're so grateful to Patty and Doug Wood. One of their projects at Grassroots Environmental Education is their Tech Safe Schools program. They talk about the science and they talk about what our schools can do today to start reducing exposures by reducing the power levels on everything. When these systems come out of the box from the manufacturer, they are full tilt. They are powered at 100%. Well, colleagues out in Silicon Valley realized in Palo Alto that they could take the power level down by more than 90% without losing any connectivity and saving those kids from being bombarded so heavily. Same thing with the beacon frequency. How frequently does it look to make and maintain that handshake? They could reduce that greatly without losing connectivity. So those are no cost starting points as we think about making our way to hardwired technology. The Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already developed kindergarten through grade 12 curriculum on how to start dialing back all these exposures from cell phones and other wireless technologies in the classroom. And then Dr. Alexia McKnight and I were invited into her children's schools on a professional development day focusing on health and wellness. And we gave 4 talks that day to different groups of teachers and administrators. So we have curriculum already developed for professional development. We would be honored to be brought into your children's schools. And then, as I mentioned early on, Dr. Mikko Ahonen and I out of Finland, we have built an online course that can be completed in about an hour for less than the cost of a movie ticket. We'll offer bulk discounts for schools and workforces, and we can literally train everybody in about an hour online. So, legal solutions. Ken, do you want to talk about this one?
I do. I do. So, you know, so when things are unfair, sometimes you have a course of action where legal action is warranted. And I'll just bring a couple of things to your attention. On this slide, I'm going to talk about something called duty of care, which is a requirement of governing boards of private and public um, uh, organizations. It's just part of it. So I'm just going to read right from Wikipedia. In tort law, a duty of care is a legal obligation that is imposed on an individual, requiring adherence to a standard of reasonable care to avoid careless acts that could foreseeably harm others and lead to the claims of negligence. It is the first element that must be established to proceed with an action in negligence. The claimant must be able to show a duty of care imposed by law that the defendant has breached. In turn, breaching a duty may subject an individual to liability. These
Mm,
people who are the board directors of Eversource and National Grid and even your local water authority, these people have liability. They have been told this is harmful. It doesn't matter if someone else told them that it's not harmful. They have been told, and they are not taking the appropriate steps. In any phase of life, if a customer came to you and said, "Ow, ow, ow, your product hurt me," the first thing you would do is say, "Please tell me what's going on. Let's see if we can make this right. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry." None of that happens in this discussion with the utilities. If you say that, they will say it is impossible. It is something else. I'm sorry you're not feeling bad. There's nothing we can do for you. This is atypical, and they all have liability on the duty of care, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. Cece?
Mm, okay.
Oh, part two. So second thing you might look at is um, look at your easement rights as written on if you're a private landowner. The utilities all have easements to your property. This is how they can fix the wires and tend to your equipment. But um, it is typically for necessary and required services or maintenance. And one could really argue that upgrading to a smart meter for a green initiative that might or might not save the planet, but will be fundamentally a different relationship to you, plus has surveillance opportunities, is not covered by those easements. Their second point is well, in general, all these legal cases are torturous and could be long and uncertain in their finality. But I've heard all of these being mentioned in Massachusetts as people are digging in because some of the people who are going to be affected by these meters are going to be high-powered attorneys. They're going to be people who can make changes. They're not marginalized people who are just keeping their head above water. They're going to be some people who are really upset and have the means to correct it. And let's hope that those are allies in this. So the utilities who actually are part of the state government instead of something very private, they there is legal precedent that the fees, opt-out fees they charge might be considered unconstitutional poll taxes. There's is an interesting set of arguments about this. It's a stretch. Everything is a stretch, but if you're looking to get a lever long enough to get the utilities' attention, the legal realm is something they're expert at, but there's, it's a judgment decision, and you might be able to bring things to attention that are hitherto unknown. So stay tuned. And there's an obligation for a utility monopoly to produce the most efficient and cheapest service for their clients and customers. And there's no way that the smart metering program could be considered that. So anyway, there are attack surfaces that someone might do if from the legal. Cece?
Okay. All right. So there are some great cases out there. The FCC was sued for ignoring 11,000 pages of scientific evidence of harm, and the FCC lost. The judges sent it back to them and said, hey, you need to account not just for cancers, but for the impacts on children, the elderly, the environment, and so forth. But the court did not give them a deadline. It's been 4.5 years now, and they've done nothing. Here, the Massachusetts Board of Health, at the state level, they have a set of legal guidelines that does actually recognize the potential harm from cell towers and so forth. There is actually a Pittsfield, Massachusetts case here that will be heard in the Massachusetts Superior Supreme Court on Wednesday, where Verizon put up a cell tower on top of the Pittsfield neighborhood. And they became very sick to the point where 17 children and adults were so sick that once their Board of Health investigated, they deemed that their homes were no longer fit to be lived in. So this has been through 5 or 6 iterations of legal cases, and we are hopeful that on Wednesday we will have a judge that will finally say, this is not right. The FCC doesn't have jurisdiction once this thing comes into the community and goes live. If it's making people sick or harming the environment, it is the duty of the Board of Health to fix that. And the Board of Health in Pittsfield very much wants to, but Verizon keeps mucking the waters. So at 8 p.m. Eastern here, we're going to do a prayer circle. And I trust that most of you received the invitation for that. So we'll be ending just a moment or two before 8 p.m. to do that. And there are lawsuits that have been happening all across the country. So you're welcome to look more into these. We're going to skip over this for now because we're running out of time, but we welcome you to read it on your own. And then in the policy arena, we helped. Oh, I want to mention that for the first time at the federal level, the Make America's Children Healthy Again Commission in their strategy document by executive order now includes we have to address man-made radio frequencies and what they're doing to us. So that's encouraging. We helped New Hampshire pass the first law in the country to investigate. They came out with this groundbreaking report that answers a lot of really pointed questions, and the executive summary on that is great to read in the first 17 pages. We have many bills here in Massachusetts. We don't hold our breath. Again, here's a good quote for why we need this right to opt out of any of these experiments. So you can read that on your own time. And the leading smart meter policy solutions, Vermont's already had the no fee opt out since 2012. So what are we doing in all these other states? There's a lot of heavy industry lobbying going on. We have 6 bills in Massachusetts right now. I just found out that this one through the Senate bill did not get advanced, but there's also a sister bill in the House with an emergency public health preamble on it, and that's to be reported out by Wednesday. So there's an action alert probably in your mailbox that would help you to take action on that to support that bill. Or you can click this link here when I give you my slides tomorrow. So next steps, we need to keep learning. I will continue to do monthly webinars on wireless risks and safer technology solutions with wonderful co-hosts like Ken and others. This is a good forum that was just done last month with folks here in Massachusetts with Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who served on the New Hampshire Commission. And this award-winning film, Generation Zapped, is now available through streaming services, including your public libraries. Great way to sit down, do a potluck supper with your family and friends, and just start learning about this together. I developed an EMF points of confusion versus fact sheet that some people like to print out and keep with them when they open this conversation. So they have something to hand to people that helps to debunk a lot of the industry disinformation we've been given. And again, there's our little course. Anybody can go learn in about an hour and level set with the facts. And it gives a handy tip sheet of reminders at the end and a certificate of completion. So for today, let's all aim for that as low as reasonably achievable to start dialing back our exposures. We're here to help. Let us know if you want to bring us in to speak to your town. And there's that quick action to support the bills. So thank you so much. Here's how you can reach Ken and me. And I do not only the 3 monthly webinars, but I also do an update meeting on the 3rd Wednesday at noon. So anybody's welcome to join us for that too. So we are unfortunately unable to take questions tonight because we need to jump off and get on the prayer circle for Pittsfield. But you're more than welcome to send your questions in. And I want to thank Ken for answering some of them as time permitted. I will go ahead now and grab the registration link for the prayer circle and drop that in to the chat. And let's see. Okay, hang on just 1 second. Things move a little more slowly while I'm active, but here it is. Okay, I will go ahead and drop that into the chat right now. Ah, where is my chat? Okay, hopefully that went out. Um, AI is trying to tell me something, but yeah, that was the link. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to connecting with you next month, if not sooner, and perhaps we'll see you in the prayer circle. Thanks, everybody. Have a tech safe night. Ken, thank you again for joining us. All right, bye-bye.